So hello and welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Diebold, and this is the Global Dialogue Lab, which is part of One World in Dialogue, and we're hosting live forums like this for about activism and creating change. Thomas and I are also part of Evolve magazine, and we're going to use part of our conversation tonight as an article for the magazine Evolve in Germany. So I have here Thomas Steininger, and with us also is Bayo Komolafe, who is an author, a spirit of transformation, and founder of the Emergence Network, and Thomas Steininger, who is the publisher of Evolve magazine and is also part of Emerge Bewusstsein-Kultur here in Germany, which is a small organization that is about the connection between consciousness and spirituality and creating change in the world. So we are so honored to have you with us, Ms. Gbowee, and it's it's an honor to have you. You're the co-winner and a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 for this extraordinary movement you catalyzed of women against the civil war in Liberia, led by Charles Taylor. And I know you've recently come from a peace march in Israel-Palestine called Women Waging Peace. That was one of the organizers was a close friend, and we'd love the four of us to have a conversation with you about making peace in a world that's filled with conflict, and how I think one of the things that has touched me so much in your work is how you have maintained your values of peace and nonviolence in the face of incredible odds. And I find that the values that you hold of peace and how you have worked with that in the most incredible conflict to be just something I'm very curious about. In speaking to the women of Women Waging Peace, you said, don't start peace unless you really mean it. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that.
Thank you so much. I think this has been a long time coming, because I know it's been on my radar to do this interview for a long time. Israel-Palestine Women Wage Peace was really a movement that everyone, especially if you're concerned about activism, you pray for, especially in places that the conflict seemed to be never ending. 8 years ago, I was in Israel. And 8 years ago, I met with women from both sides of the divide. And the word I got from the Israeli women was, oh, we're too comfortable to start a movement. You know, this is not our thing. And then 2 years ago, I get an invitation to present, do a video for them at the end of their fast. And that was the beginning of this journey. When I went there, what I saw was all these boys in Jerusalem, in Tel Aviv, on the internet, with Israelis living in the diaspora, about women wage peace. They had created a sense of hope amongst the people. And it really took me back to when we started doing activism in Liberia, when we started our protest. Someone wrote me and said, you have become the symbol of hope for a country that is in war for 14 years. And that was like, whew, this is a lot of pressure to be the symbol of hope, especially when you carry all of the pain. But then the question was beyond a lot of pressure, it was also a huge responsibility. And when I made this statement to the women, it was that it's not just for you, it's not just for the politicians, it's for the future generation of this nation that has a narrative that is like, war is all we do. You are now coming to change this narrative. And if you're not serious about changing this narrative, because you're going to face a lot of danger, you'll be ostracized, you will not get invited to places, because in essence, what Women Wage Peace is doing is to challenge the status quo of Israel as that powerful nation holding on to its military narrative. You are trying to dismantle that and say we can be a people of peace. And if you and because you started, and for 2 years you've been on this journey, and for 2 years people are beginning to believe in you. If you stop now, or if you know you can't continue, please don't leave these people on, because that's exactly what you've done. When I got there, the women had said to me, there was some mainstream media that has said to them, we're not going to cover your program because we don't believe in what you do. But by day 2, those same mainstream media was asking, can we do an interview, not just with Ms. Gbowee, but with the Women Wage Peace? And then when 20,000 people turned out in front of Netanyahu's house on that last day, that was hope. And they need to keep the momentum going. They can't see that movement as, peace is not a process, it's an event. So you can't just celebrate a huge movement and let that die. Because that movement, those 20,000 people, primarily young people who showed up, were saying we're journeying with this group because they represent what we represent, a future of nonviolence in this country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very powerful. And I think for while war is not happening within the United States at this moment, there has been a psychic war, I think, in the United States, and this that came to a head this week. And I wonder how you see the relationship between the two.
Well, you know, I was one person who was very optimistic that there was going to be a Hillary win, not just for her, because I know that as a politician, she was going to be representing some of what a political establishment represents, which is totally against some of the principles and values that we stand for. Mm-hmm. But as a feminist, as someone who believes that for far too long, the other half of the world's population has been left out. For someone who believes that there is a serious double standard in this country, in the US, primarily because they hold every other nation accountable for gender issues but themselves, I saw it as a hope. And for the work that I do also, that her elections will also not just break the glass ceiling here, but it will continue to inspire young girls everywhere that you can be exactly what you want to be, even if you find yourself in one of the countries that misogynism or misogynistic views and all of the inequalities still exist. When it did not happen that night, 2 things I told myself. My work has gotten harder. For those of us who come from Africa, you see all of the dictators in our region in line heaping praises on Trump. Mm-hmm. We cannot go back to some of these people and say women's rights. Mm-hmm. They will quote the US electoral system and say if they rejected a woman, who are we to now bring any woman forward. That's the first thing I thought about. The second thing was that in terms of activism, it's time for us to be proactive. We need to begin to strategize about all of those things that we care about. This is not the time to be stunned and say, oh my God, let's give him a chance. No, it's time to plan. Plan that maybe there may be a reversal around women's rights issue in this country, and it will affect other parts of the world somehow. How do we begin to strategize as activists on our counter, whether it's protest, whether it's policy? We can't sit down. Mm-hmm. When it comes to Islamophobia, how do we begin to already plan around it? But this moment is a moment, I read somewhere, someone said, it's a moment where we must remain loud. Mm-hmm. Loud about the things that are important to us. For me, it is women's rights and peace. Mm-hmm. And we need to remain loud about it. Mm-hmm. When I think about a Trump win and the potential for him and Russia to be allies, I think about South Sudan. Because a few weeks ago, it was Russia who blocked the sanction for South Sudan at the Security Council. So then if there is something like this that is going to happen, imagine all of those in Africa who do not want to live by the democratic principles that we all hope we can continue to live by. And if they are allies of him, when there is war, who suffer the most? Mm-hmm. When there are political upheavals, who suffer the most? The women and the children suffer the most. So you need to begin to think about the implication. Someone sent an article to me about the implication of his presidency on Africa. And then someone wrote, because they started the whole chain of conversation amongst us as activists, that it's time to begin to lobby to make him focus on Africa. I said, instead of wasting that energy, it's time for us in Africa, and I'm sure my brother there will agree with me, that it's time for us to begin to chart a course for ourselves. Mm-hmm. But this is not just an African phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. If you're concerned about equality and justice and freedom of worship and freedom of expression, you need to begin to start to chart a course. Mm-hmm. A course that will remain loud to say that this will not happen on this continent. This will not happen because there are people inside of the US and outside who will resist, and they will resist non-violently. And we have the potential. I mean, I don't think one man can come and undo some of the things that we've worked for and billions of people stand for in 1 year or 4 years. But it's a worrisome time. It's a fearful time. I mean, I'm not afraid, I feel like these are the challenges that should embolden us now as activists to say, let's start or let's continue doing what we know to do best. Mm-hmm. Write, publish, speak, non-violently protest, but never give in. Because giving in will mean taking our world back 100 years.
No, thank you so much for that, and also just from my side, it's an honor to speak to you. I was very impressed when I learned about your work in Liberia, and it was very impressed the way you stood up. What impressed me were two things, because this is not just about activism you are talking about. This is activism under life-threatening circumstances. And one person with many other persons willing to give everything to stand up as you're talking right now. But also the way you were standing up, you were not partaking in a confrontation that were part of the course of violence. What you did, you broke the logic of violence in your own creative, non-violent, giving everything, standing for your cause, for peace in Liberia, for the women's cause in Liberia. That's something of an example that I felt I really I wanted to talk with you what kind of activism is needed in order to really do something different, because activism we have seen many forms of activism, but there's something new also needed from the activist side. And you seem to be the example to really, you chartered something, what you were doing there. And it seems that right now, in this world situation that we are right now, this is something we have to talk about. We have to have courage, but we also have to be full-hearted, not just taking part of the conflict, but going beyond the conflict in standing for the cause that we are standing for.
Well, most times when people ask, I tend to say, I mean, for our movement, given that we're very small and we were, the first thing that I would say in all honesty is that the level of our faith, Christian, Muslim coming together and just believing that it was possible for us to do what we did. The second thing was that we came with no agenda, no hidden agenda, nothing other than peace. And that makes a whole lot of difference. Most times when you see people out there and they say they're protesting, there is always, I've seen in many instances, something else. We want peace, and once they start having a conversation, then you see the actual reason for why they're protesting. Let me give an example. I have been one of those people who really follow a lot of the new waves of movements that start around the world. And you tend to find, I'll take a step back. So we had no agenda. The second thing was that it wasn't about any personality. It wasn't about anyone at the end of the day receiving any accolade or accolade. I'd never thought in my mind that I would win the Nobel Peace Prize. Till today, it's still like a dream. I got involved because I was 17 when the war started and was 34. By the time we were 31, by the time we were protesting and doing what we did. So it was never about being in the limelight, having 10 million followers on social media, it was about that tiny nation of 3.5 or 4 million people where 10% of our population had already been killed. That was what it was about. The fourth thing that I would say it was about also, it was about us using our pain and the brokenness of our bodies to really confront the dictatorship. Two things we saw happening. We were sure and certain that we were never going to use violence as a means of addressing this problem. Because trying to use violence would mean trying to turn off fire using fire. We already had gone through violence, we're seeing violence, so non-violence was the only means we knew we could use to achieve that. Wherever we could get allies, wherever someone's voice could be added to our voices, we were willing to do that. If it meant taking a step back and letting our allies take a step forward so that they could, the point for us was, it was a united cause. It wasn't just an individual cause. So let me come to today's reality. What do we see happening in our world today? Most people start movements, and the movement that they start reinforce a lot of the divisions that we have in communities in the first place. So for example, I met with some activists who have been protesting police violence in this country, in the US. And the whole process is just falling apart, seriously. And so I asked them, why do you think? You won't believe that in a movement that is supposed to address inequality, there is so much mistrust and distrust that if a new person came in, there was always this thing of, oh no, you don't belong here because you're not of our color, of our creed, or whatever. It can never work that way. All of this social justice movement that we all claim we want to be a part of has to be the model for what we see society being. So I was asking these young people, say, okay, so you don't want this group of people, yes. Then I asked some of the group of people that had gotten rejected, why did you want to come into this group? Oh, well, even though we know we have not been in some of the problems they've been in, but our ultimate goal for protest is transformation. Then I asked the group, what is your ultimate goal for protest? Transformation. So why is it so difficult for you to come together when all of you have similar goal? But because there are always underlying issues, at the end of the day, people are thinking, so if all of them join us and this thing becomes successful, who gets the glory? Mm-hmm. Who can claim that they have more people on social media? That was not the thing for us. We barely had anyone who could use, I don't remember knowing anything called Facebook in 2003. I don't even know if it was invented at the time. I had an old Alcatel cell phone and I could barely do text messages. So to show you that we didn't even have the media, like even the mainstream media, we didn't have, they called us pathetic looking. People who they thought would never succeed in anything they did. I think as beautiful as social media is, as a rallying call, as beautiful as the internet age is, it takes away from activism. It takes a lot away because people now see activism as how many million followers you have. And the actual work is on the ground. Yes, you can use it to put out your information, but if you're not doing that groundwork, if you are not collectively mobilizing, if you do not have a sense of this is our leader, let's go back into history and see all of the movements that succeeded, from Dr. King to Gandhi to Mandela. There was a figurehead, one person that everyone looked up to as this is the leader of this movement. They spoke on behalf of the movement. They wrote on behalf of the movement. They went to jail representing the movement and every other thing. Today, how many places can you say have one person that represents the voice of 10 million people? Everyone has a view, even if they form part of one particular movement on social media. So no one knows who's talking and who they can take it from. I gave you an example of the Black Lives Matter. Who can you point to in the US to say this is the official leader of Black Lives Matter? Like the civil rights movement here had Martin Luther King Jr. But today they'll tell you, oh, these are all leaders. Because everyone comes with a different agenda. And I think what made us successful was because we closely followed the model of some of those old protest movements. And we didn't have any ultimate agenda. I know how many times I was offered jobs from the government, from within opposition, as we protested. And it was like, hell no, this is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for peace for Liberia. Even after the peace agreement was signed, the first offer I got was to work directly in the office of the transitional president. My answer was no still. And even this current president had made many attempts to recruit me for cabinet. My answer still was no. Because at the end of the day, sometimes once you've made that sacrifice, you have to continue to make it so that people never don't see the work as, oh, all along, all they did was to be in government or to get some lucrative position. And this is where we really and truly need to bring young people.
Wow, yeah.
I see you wants to say something. Do you have a point?
Yeah, big sister. I just wanted to greet you and acknowledge you, and I'm so grateful that you are. Can I call you big sister? I think we are.
No wahala.
No wahala. Great. So I've just been, when I heard of your story and just investigated basically the things that you've been doing, I felt a sense of pride, because not simply because you are a sister, but because I feel that we are in a time when the way we respond to crisis has to change, basically. I like to say that the way we respond to crisis is often part of the crisis. And I think you and Tom have fleshed that out a bit. So when you started the work, for instance, at 17 years old, and I'll just frame it as a question and a comment as well. The country that I grew up in is almost split ideologically into the Muslim North and the Christian South. And I'm not sure exactly how it is. I know you know that, how it is in Liberia. But the first intriguing thing for me to ask is exactly how you were able to rise out of the very, the temptation to make absolute your belief systems, to kind of authorize the Muslims, because I know and understand that you come from a very deep Christian background. Now, people in Nigeria that I know are not going to, identify with the other people, the pagans, people on the other side. So the first intriguing thing for me is what values, what narratives or motivations invited you to see the world as a murmuration, if you will, a confluence of different belief systems, and to invite you to work with different people for the sake of peace?
Well, let me say this, and I think this is very important for the way we work with our children, the way we socialize them, and the kinds of things that we feed in their heads, especially in today's world. I grew up in a tiny community. So I was 17 when the war started, and I was 31 when I started the movement with the women. I grew up in a community in Liberia that was a mixture of Christian and Muslims. And we probably had about 8 of Liberia's 16 ethnic groups in that community. But it was really a real community. And I'll give you an example. We lived in that community from the time I was born until I graduated high school. So my parents finally built their dream house into a quote-unquote suburban neighborhood the year of the war. I mean, like 1990, March, we moved to their new house. And we were on our porch the first morning, on the back porch, and we saw 2 little children come with bowls to our house. My sister and I were just about a year apart. And they came and said, "We're hungry, we want to eat." You would have thought that we had probably come from another country, because we were looking at each other and saying, "What?" Say, "We are hungry, we want to eat." So we went in the kitchen and served them food. Lunchtime, they came back, "We are hungry, we want to eat." It was then that we recognized that even though we came from a very poor neighborhood, but we lived in a bubble. Because the sense of community that we had been socialized with was that every mother knew the parents next door who could not afford food and send food. So for us growing up, we never saw children beg for food where we came from. We never saw, so we had the only television set in our neighborhood. Everybody came to watch TV in our house. So even you as the child of the house, you knew where to sit, on the floor. So it was not like the children of the house sat in the sofa and the guests from outside, we all sat on the floor. My dad would walk in and say, "Let me see all those who have taken their bath." You as a child of that house, if you had not taken your bath, they were putting you outside, you would not watch TV. When it was Ramadan, we all wore new clothes. When it was Christmas, we all wore new clothes. When the year ended where you finished the school year, they would give you your report card. We would take our report card and go from house to house to show to every father in the next door house to say, if you have passed, you got a coin. If you have failed, they're whipping you. So imagine about 10 houses in that neighborhood, every father giving you a smack. That was very people. So that was my socialization. When the war came, it turned that upside down. It made me upset. because I now started hearing things like, oh, you can't talk to this ethnic group because they are the ones killing our people, or you can't do this. So it's like, no, this is not my reality. So I think when we started working as Christians and Muslims, I think it was something that had been planted in me, and I think I've written about it. That seed as a child, the seed of understanding that we are all humans. We share a common humanity regardless of how we pray. So when we started working with the women, it became very important for me to tell them, let's move beyond what we see. Let's move beyond the politics of our time. Let's move beyond. But let me ask you all a question. If a bullet was rained in on this room where we're sitting as Christian and Muslim women, can you say that the bullet would pick out the Muslim women and leave the Christian women? The answer was no. Okay, many of you in this circle have lost children. Is the pain of losing a child different between a Christian and a Muslim woman? No. Are these fighters selectively raping women based on their religious background? No. So what do we have in common? Everyone responded, we have a common humanity. And so it was building off of that common humanity that made it important that made it possible for us to do the work that we do. When we come back to your question, I think what we see happening in our world today is something that we saw a lot of during the US election. So you share something different from me. You're white and black. You're raised with stereotypes about my kind. I'm raised with stereotypes about your kind. This is my theory. Every time you treat me on the basis of your stereotype or your stereotypical belief of me, you build a thin wall between you and I. Every time you act on it, you reinforce that wall. And every time you act on it, you reinforce that wall. Over time, when you look at me, you don't see a human anymore because my humanity is lost in your belief of me. What you see is the object of your stereotype. Typical example, Rwanda. For many years, the narrative was Tutsis are snakes, Hutus are cockroaches. When you see a snake, what do? You chop off the head. When you see a cockroach, what do? You step on it. In 1 month or less than a month, 800,000 people were killed. Those who were doing the killing were not killing humans. They were killing either cockroaches or snakes because over time, they could not see the human in these people anymore. And so for you to be able to do activism or to change a situation or to make peace, even those who hold the gun, you must be able to see that these are humans. And as much as I don't like the way they conduct their business, I have to engage with them and be the bigger and better person. And I think if anything in this US, this is what this country needs right now. Because during the entire period of elections, different group of people were demonized on their faith, on their sexuality, on their race, on their gender. And over time, for some people, when they see a hair scarf, they don't see a woman, they see a possible migrant that is coming to bomb them. And they're being treated, or they will be treated on that basis, and this is recipe for disaster. So I think for us and Bio, it was coming back to seeing the common humanity. And for the Christian North for the Christian South and the Muslim North in Nigeria, I think this is the kind of things that people need to do, because over time, once you've held on to all of these stereotypes and they are not my kind, those people, us versus them, that can only be resolved if you begin to have conversations, because it's in coming into my space and learning about me and getting to know my pains and my fears and my agitation that you begin to rehumanize me.
Go ahead, Bio.
It seems I have to unmute you. Bio, you're muted.
Yeah. So yeah, the muting stuff. Thank you so much for that. So there's a sense in which I feel there you hold a. But I think what was most exciting for me was the way you organized those women to respond. I mean, during that time of crisis in Liberia. So it wasn't that you picked up arms to fight Charles Taylor, who was eventually brought over by Obasanjo, and it was a huge thing. I was a bit young at that time when Obasanjo brought over Charles Taylor, but the fact that it was about dancing and praying and sitting in and insisting on a sex strike. I think I read in one place. I feel that there's a powerful there's a powerful arena. There are other places of power that we're not tapping into, that is just left to dry out because we're so used to a pattern of responding to crisis that we are caged in or imprisoned. But I just want to invite another response from you, a true libation, if you will, and that's around what confuses you. Like I know that there are some ideologies that ground your faith, your belief in one humanity. But have you encountered an event or a situation that kind of confounded your deeply held and cherished ideas about how the world should work or how the world should unfurl? Have you met a situation where, I think let me step back a bit and put a frame around it. So I like to describe myself as a recovering professor. I actually teach in university in Nigeria, Covenant University. I left the university because I came to realize, I'm right now in India, just to give you a context. I came to realize that I'm part of an interrupted landscape, a landscape that has been denied its own sense of identity, of education, of what it means to be grounded. My stories I don't tell. You said no wahala to me. That's probably the only pidgin English that I understand, Ms. Gbowee. It's like I don't even speak my language. It's like I was thoroughly educated, so thoroughly educated that I've lost touch with my own landscapes. And I entered the university teaching psychology. And I came to understand how these structures, these frames, are part of the denial or the stifling of the African voice, if you will. I left the university 2 years ago. I'm still kind of related to them, maybe going once in a while to do some teaching and speaking, but I left the university because I felt it was part of a larger frame of mind that did not allow us to actually exhibit our own creativity, our own knowledges and indigenous vantage points. So I know that you are involved with kids and children and girls right now. Are there edges and limitations to your work that confound you, that make you feel, I'm not exactly sure how to go about this, or I may be perpetuating the same crisis that I want to escape? Mandela was praised for so many things, for ending apartheid, he didn't exactly end it, but for being a champion for those voices. But at one end, he was also castigated for propagating neoliberal expansionism, for being the one that brought the companies and those money systems that has put the ANC where it is today. What are your black spots or shadows or blind spots that haunt you, sister, big sister?
Well, we all have them. We all have to deal with them at different points in time. And working with young women, would really challenge you. And for me, if you read my book, you recognize that a part of my story is having multiple sexual partners over time. That I was in these relationships, that I wasn't married to these individuals. And now I'm at a place where I can look back and say, wow, that was a horrible life, and this is not something I wish for any young woman. Well, how do I begin to preach morality when I have this history? You know, that's a serious, touchy area. The second thing was that I had my children in a space, I have 4 of my children in a space of 5 years. And as one running a foundation for education, I know that if you have your first child at 21, the second at 22, the third at 24, and the fourth at 26, in 5 years, it means that you have an economic burden. Your chances of going back to better your life is high. So I've been there. I've seen this. But how do I communicate this to young people without them seeing me as a hypocrite, without them seeing me as someone who is living a double standard life, you know, that you did this and now you are. So we have a policy in the foundation that when you're in our program, we pay for everything at the university level. You have to sign a contract that you will go back and give 1 year service to your community, however you see it fit, and that you will not get pregnant while you're in our program. Mm-hmm. We've dropped 5 of our students for that. And then I go to bed and say to myself, oof, this is hard. Mm-hmm. Because I really want these girls to get an education. I have to be able to pass, you know, this part, even though I've put it there as a fear factor, mm-hmm. and I've dropped some of these students as a means of showing that I'm really serious about this. But how do I bring these girls? Because I don't want it to be 5 young women who were midway through college, got pregnant, got dropped off the program, and never continued their education. So what we've been able to do is to say, okay, if you manage to get yourself back into school for at least 1 semester and come back with the grade point average that we want to see, we will send you back to school. So a few of them have been able to do that. One just graduated with a degree in agriculture. I was proud about it. But then I encounter another one who has no ability of even sponsoring herself for half a semester. So now the question to me is, do you let this, and you know that she's a very brilliant child, do you let her sit down and waste, or do you help educate her, help her finish, get her degree, and then, you know, let her go through life? And now the answer is definitely, I have to go back to this class and just help these girls. So that's one of the areas that really challenge me. The other area is that I am not a diplomat. I use my voice to speak truth to power. I'm one person who will tell it as it is. And now with this global role, I get a lot of, you know, you need to tune it down a bit or else you may not be invited into spaces. I've defied that. You know, I was going to speak at the Security Council a year ago, and I was asked by my team that my speech be moderate because, you know, we have to deal with the UN. Then my question to them was, okay, if I be moderate and I'm coming outside, by some mistake I get knocked down by a car and die, I would die with my honest view. No one would have heard it. And they were laughing and saying, oh no, you're not going to die, but just be moderate. And I went into that space that day, look at all of the power brokers, and I said to myself, I cannot be moderate because this is what the world is knowing me to be. That person who will use her voice, I don't have a political power, I don't have the monetary power, but speaking truth in this world when everyone else wants to be moderate is something that the world needs. And I went in there and spoke my truth. And though everyone was afraid I wasn't going to get invited back, I got invited back and I continued to get invited back. And they've asked me to serve as one of the advocates for the Sustainable Development Goal. Does that, so someone asks, don't you think they're reining you in to keep you in check? No, no one can keep them. So you, again, all of us have those things, those moments, those issues that will either challenge us, our past, our present, or something we've done professionally. And you know what? As women, we are judged more harshly for these things than men are. So it's always before me. Always.
I know Elizabeth is leaning in, and she, I don't know if that's an indication that something wants to be done but I'm really enjoying this exchange, and it's activating so many things in me. So I feel that my work, or the things I write about or speak about, are grounded in a deep feminist ethos. And what that means for me is it's not exactly the third wave feminism, the idea that it's now time for women, the kind of surface feminism that those who are supporting Clinton brought into the limelight. That's not the feminism I'm talking about. It's the feminism of noticing or redescribing the world according to of maybe attaching ourselves or noticing that we're entangled with each other, so that in a very deep sense, I am you and you are me. And
let me say one thing before you go even further, because once you start the conversation around feminism, then you have me ticked and going. The one thing that I can say to you is that whether those who bring the Clinton kind of feminism or the African feminism or the one who says this is our time, whatever, for me personally, I see feminism as feminism. If you are describing it as we are intertwined or we are together, we are one, our coexistence depends on the other. For you to thrive, I need to thrive. If that is what you're saying, I'm saying to you, that is the same feminism that everyone else is preaching. And you cannot say, for me to thrive means you have to thrive, but then stay in the house and thrive.
Yeah. I guess we agree with that. That's me. I could give you a high five for that. That's the kind of
my niece, who is a strong feminist, and she's sitting right here with me, and she's going, because once you start, she was like, and then she went, yes, once I said it,
so I can assure you it's that for me too. I mean, my wife, and I don't like to call her wife. I feel that's such a good word. Like for me, it's sometimes we interchange, and she calls me her wife, and I say she's my husband. And I can tell you how many times I do the dishes and stuff like that. So that's no problem for me. I'm recounting or trying to describe something that I feel is a deeper, more enchanted or sacred understanding of what feminism actually brings to the picture. And there's a Liberian proverb that I like so much. It's probably the only one I know. And it says, the smoke doesn't affect the honeybees alone. It affects the honey gatherers as well. So that in a sense, we're all part of a process that makes us, the Ubuntu, basically. That we are interactive. Our boundaries melt into each other. So when I refer to an old style of feminism, I'm referring to the one that called for equality. But I'm talking about a deeper one that goes beyond equality and says that it's not about taking Clinton, for instance, since that is still very powerful now, taking Clinton to the White House. It's about addressing the frames, the structures that keep oppression powerful. And I'm speaking about a hegemonic system that makes it possible that, there's no justice in just replacing the gender of a person who is at top of a machine that is killing environments or dumbing down communities. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
I feel like even though it was not about Clinton, but it was something about the hegemony that needs a bit of deconstruction in order to be true to Ubuntu. So how do you say that we are intertwined? We're all supposed to do this together. But then there's this one group in all of this to collectivity or collectivism that have been the one to rule forever. The power is situated there. Isn't that double standard? Because there has to be a shift. If we believe in this, let it be rotational. And it's definitely not about her. It is about, if I am qualified and you are qualified, let's journey together to make this world different. But if I'm qualified and you are not qualified, but because of your gender, you are preferred over me, then in essence, what you're saying is the same thing that feminism, whether it's extreme or moderate or liberal or whatever, has been saying over time. But if we must move this from a very theoretical conversation about feminism to a practical, because I'm a practical person, Bio, cover your one eye. We're on screen. Cover your one eye.
Did I? Okay.
Wait now. Can you see? You know, you still, your finger is still, cover it well. Cover it well. Can you see everything that you have been seeing with your two eyes?
No, I can't.
This is how the world is functioning. Women, consider them the other half of the world. You need both eyes to see very well.
Yeah.
And that is the spirit of Ubuntu. Collectivism, togetherness, unity, using our unique strength, skills, and ability to make the world better. But if you take one and cover it and say, we can't use this, even you, who is the other eye that we're using, you get exhausted because there's a lot of strain on this eye. And at some point, you will not be able to see everything that you could see before. So for me, that is the point. Let's not take it from there. Let's get it into perspective, because tomorrow you too will have a daughter, if you don't already have.
He does.
I do.
Okay. That's where I bring it home. This is the reason for my struggle. People say, oh, you've won the prize and you still do 10 times more than you did when you were. I said, because those things that I'm fighting for, I don't want my daughters to fight for them at the end of the day. Let me make it easier for them to live.
Yes.
No,
yes. Sorry, Elizabeth, I just need to clarify something.
I want to get, just so you know, I want to, as soon as we can, open up for the whole
space
group to ask questions. But
so I just need to clarify something. I may have come across as maybe saying that it's not about that. So I'm not saying
no, you don't need to clarify. Understand exactly. Any man who will agree for his wife to call him wife, you're fine with me. Clarify that.
My question or my comment wasn't even, my comment was really about the frames that frame our sense of justice, basically. And for me, it's not about even breaking the glass ceiling. I'm talking about the glass building here, where we operate a binary system, man versus women. And then we live in a society where the men are placed above women. I can't have that. And I feel that the way to actually address that is not to summarily place women over men, because that will perpetuate a different kind of injustice.
And that's not what we've been asking for. It's just respect.
I know. Yeah. It's to level the playing field. So I know that I am you. I'm a woman. I want to say I'm a woman. That there is no strict binary, that there is a continuum that flows, so that in a very powerful sense, I am white, I am black, I am green, I'm Spirogyra, I'm tree, I am you, you are me. So that it's not about you owning power and then rotating to me over time. It's about us addressing each other as aspects, hyphenated aspects of each other. But we'll continue the conversation. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, there's a lot that I'd like to open up from there. I've done a lot of work with girls, and what's interesting, Bio, I think from what I hear from Ms. Gbowee is that, and it's so true. It's like when you're 8 years old, when you look up at the world and you only see men on TV and in these powerful places, to have a figure that is female, that is strong, that means something, that's part of an acculturation, that's part of a deep thing, and that is a frame. That is a frame that's on the world, and that's a frame that our kids get. They understand it, they see it, they feel it, they get that, what that means. And politics and neoliberalism and so on and so forth, one thing, what what kids see and how they make sense out of the world is very very visual, very visceral. It's like who's where, who has power, and they're both that need to be taken into account.
They do. They do. It's something I think I discussed with you, Elizabeth. I was invited to a menstruation panel once, and I'm a panel on sustainable menstruation, and I have no idea till today why I was invited there, because I was the only guy there. But I was invited to that panel to speak about what we can do to make menstruation sustainable. And everyone that was speaking about that, said, okay, we need to educate women so they don't throw tampons in the public. We need to educate them so that they are more civil with using it. And for me, that wasn't the point. We're like hiding women. Like, that's a shameful thing to be. I mean, it's a shameful thing to menstruate. It's not. So I was speaking about the resacralization of menstruation. That's another place of power. We need to acknowledge that women, to be in that place is to have a deep connection with all of life. It's not a thing that we need to hide away, like sustainability, like to kind of couch it and protect it and then paint it as something like is the way adverts represent menstruation with blue, on the screen. Like it's so shameful that we shouldn't show you this, that it's red, that it's blood, that it's life. So basically, for me, it's about resacralizing our connections with all the places of power that are missing. And that's what I feel that is powerful about your work, Ms. Gbowee. That you didn't take up arms, that you conquered an entire system, a civil war, by doing the opposite of what seems appropriate, singing and praying and stuff that you did. And I still want to talk with you about exactly those things that you came across that, maybe weren't so effective, or probably things that were effective.
Okay.
So let's open for questions now. I'm sure people have been.
And to do that, I will also open the video channels, and I will go through one by one. I have to do it this way and ask you to open your video camera, and please come on screen. All right.
We have people on telephone.
Okay. Thank you, Bial. And you want to moderate it?
Yeah, sure. Savannah, go ahead.
Hi. I have learned millions of things I never would have imagined. You cannot beat yourself up about your past, because that makes you who you are. And it's not our fault that so much knowledge has been suppressed. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Okay.
Linda, where's Linda?
Linda has a question.
I can see her right now.
She may be on the phone.
Here. Linda, I put your audio on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I really appreciate this topic, this conversation, this opportunity. And I guess I was really mesmerized in looking at your work a little bit about something I know so little about, which is the singing and the dancing, and that part of the feminism strength that brings communities together and helps with change. And I've seen some of that even just this last week or so with the Native work they're doing out at the Dakota site, and the jingle dancing and the women getting together. But it's something I know so little about. I wondered if you could really speak to that.
All right. I think one of the, it was not until maybe a month ago, I was going to Harvard School of Divinity to do some sessions there, that someone asked me about the symbolism of the singing and the dancing. A lot of people will just overlook that as part of the, the culture of, or these are women, they will sing and dance. But for our movement, the singing was the healing part. The dancing was the healing part. We had so much trauma, even within that group, that the mornings that we wake up and cry, it was that singing or just dancing that would give us the fuel that we needed to start again. So people would see it as, it's part of the African tradition, yes, but it was also part of a movement that had so much, because a lot of the songs that we sang had meanings, and a lot of it spoke deeply to our souls. And even though we were on a physical journey of stopping a war, but we're also on a spiritual journey of being guided by God. And when the war started in Liberia, one of the ways people describe moving from one place to the other was during the Exodus. Mm-hmm. So if you go back to the Bible, during Moses' time, that was the period of Exodus. Mm-hmm. And so if we were to give ourselves that name, probably was the rebuilding, the Nehemiah period or the Joshua period that the women were in. But that singing, for me, every time those women broke into singing, it was to squeeze out all of the negative emotions that we had been carrying and to get positive emotions in. Because in order to do nonviolent activism, you can't allow bitterness to set in and take control. You have to persistently, deliberately exhale, take out negativity and refuel with positivity. If you see, most times protesters are angry and they end up doing what they're protesting, violence, you realize that because they have allowed, because when you're in a mood of protest, people will say negative things to you. It will hurt. In order for you not to raise your hand to slap, who say when we're protesting, we didn't get things like prostitutes, go and sit down, or married women, all kinds of names people will call us. We'll just sit, hold hands, pray, sing, and the dance then came when we had ended the singing, and that was the renewal part. So the singing was to take out, the dancing was to refuel. So that is the explanation I would give for that.
Great.
I think it's remarkably powerful, and like I said, something I missed. I grew up with feminists and women burning their bras, and it was all very powerful, and I'm pretty intellectual, but I've missed that entire part of connecting to that part of the feminine and using it as a strength.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Ellen?
Thank you.
Wait just a sec. We've got to unmute you, I think.
I'll unmute me.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. A comment. This has been, and Elizabeth knows that we're on the very cusp of developing some work to bring women together to raise the women's voice as a result of the election here in the United States, but to say there's issues that are affecting all of us. One of the people that's on right now is Noriko. She's in Japan, and her issue is very, very afraid of nuclear weapons, obviously, because of what happened at Hiroshima. You know, so this has been an empowering conversation that we're going to try to build on, to take, and no offense to the men that are on this conversation, oftentimes though, because the women's voice is not heard, that a collective group of women can come together and help resolve problems. And I am just really, really pleased that this took place when it did, so close to our election. And it has given me a lot of food for thought. And I'm going to turn to Elizabeth and say, you know, that if we can harness this as well, which she knows we're going to be doing with Zoom and with Noriko in Japan and people across the United States and around the world. There was a wonderful conference that we all know about, the Beijing conference, where Hillary Clinton said about women's rights are human rights, and human rights are women's rights. That perhaps by using the technology, we can ultimately bring back the conference, but perhaps do it not only locally in a location, but how empowering would it be to have an international women's conference done virtually, like we're doing right now. And so that's kind of the work that we're going to be starting. And it's not so much a question, but I just wanted to say that I am so pleased and that this was presented when it was. And so it gives me and Noriko, who's on, and my partner Lynn, who's not on, and Elizabeth, who we've asked to join us as well, some ideas of how to move and harness the knowledge of women and help start resolving problems, and not only in Liberia, but in the United States, but in Japan, and probably thousands of other places across the world. So I just want to say thank you, in short. So that's it. Thank you, Elizabeth, for doing this.
Sure. Ms. Gbowee, I was wondering if you have a very you feel how essential it is for women to be part of the peace process. And I'd love to hear you speak about why women in peace. There's something important.
You know, if you take a step back and look at all of the peace processes that have happened globally, a lot of the conversations around the table is about jobs, is about power. It's about everything else but the reason the wars started in the first place. Most of the wars that we've seen primarily in Africa starts because of inequality, unequal access to the natural resources, one ethnic group prolonging itself in power. When they go to war and sit at the peace table, you would think that the purpose for discussing peace would be to discuss all of these things that led us into this place. It becomes who controls the towns with all of the biggest deposit of diamonds or coltan or whatever else they've been fighting for. It's never about the people that they claim to represent. What I've seen from the Liberian experience to the Ivorian experience to all of the other places that even now with South Sudan, when women sit at the table, it is bringing these people back to the mind of, we have a community. There are people in this community that we need to focus on. So it's just taking their minds away from all of the power issue, the wealth issue, and the politics issue, and bringing it back to the true essence of what a community should be. So the way I describe it is that women bring the human touch to the peace table. They are the ones who remind even the international actors that come to do peace that we are doing this for this purpose. Go back and do your research. Most of the countries that had peace processes and went to quote unquote peace without any input of women have gone back to war, or they're in a state of crisis.
Mm.
Not many people are talking about it, but look at Mozambique today. And if you look at the peace process in Mozambique, not a single woman was involved in that process. Today, it's the same warring faction, and it's the same issues of war that has started to happen again. So it's just the voice and the conscience of the process. That's what women bring to the table. When we were at the peace talk in Ghana, I know that there were many questions about, why do we need, and the Nigerian general at the time insisted that we sat in the defense meeting. And one of the days whilst we're sitting in the defense meeting, the American general decided that we had to leave the meeting because we're not part of any military institution. We should not be in the meeting. There was a back and forth between the Nigerian general and the American general. The Nigerian general said they will stay in this meeting because the military is actually for the protection of the people. If we are considering redoing the military in Liberia, don't you think these people are the ones who should tell us where they failed in the first place that got us to where we are? So that those are the kinds of things that women bring to the table when there's the peace processes.
Mm. Great, thank you.
Exactly.
I think we should break into breakout groups, and then we'll continue our conversation with Ms. Gbowee with bio and the two of us, and then we'll that'll be about 20 minutes. And
so you will get an invitation to join a group, and would like to ask you to accept the invitation. And as soon as you do this, you will join a group of 4, and we will come back in 20 minutes, and you get a notice 1 minute before your small group will end.
Well, Elizabeth, can you hear me?
yes.
Joanna tells me I'm on till 12:30, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I have a full day ahead of me.
Okay.
Sharon, did you get an invitation to join a group? There is, Sharon, there should be one pop-up window that asks you to join.
It says need something.
Yeah, it's that he hasn't joined yet. Can you see that? Yeah, bio. Sorry, you're muted. Okay.
Thomas is silencing me.
I was surprised because you should be able to unmute yourself, but obviously
I can't.
Technique doesn't work the way I thought it would.
Yeah.
So we should have this 20 minutes also to continue the conversation. And I guess there was a lot also you want to respond to. So
well, I would like to speak more about or hear more about your work with girls and why you feel because I think we're in such a I think a complex place. I mean, Bio was speaking about how and I know this from in India and lots of different places, that the education, it's like, how do we create an education that actually allows girls to ground themselves in something deeper and part of their culture, as well as learn the skills that they need to learn in order to be able to be change makers in their communities. You know, what kind of education do we feel that girls, or do you feel the girls need most at this point?
Well, you know, when I started doing the work with the foundation, it was more about a legacy after the Nobel. So the first part of my life is now, most of the Nobel Peace Prize winners will say there are two parts of life, before and after. So the after part was, what do you want your legacy to be? And the answer was, my life as an activist, which continues to today, barely brought in young girls into the space of activism. And I wanted to cover that. So it was about providing education support for girls. So we started the foundation with the goal of providing leadership and educational opportunities for young women. And the reason why it was important to me was because, coming from my background, I realized that if you were working with these girls in most of the communities, they had the ability. So from kindergarten to 6th grade, the parents are anxious to send the girls to school. From 7th grade to 9th grade, they're having second thoughts. If our first thing, there's this economic thing where they have to prioritize. If I have a son and a daughter, who should I invest in? You know, and most times they'll say, let me invest in my son, because by 7th grade is puberty, and the tendency for her to probably get pregnant, or the potential of having a baby, is very high at this point. So I'd rather invest in my son rather than investing in my daughter. So then you have a huge dropout rate at this stage. In most of my tour working with young girls, who say, tell our parents to try us. Let them invest in us past junior high, and they will see. So for me, if I go into communities and see young girls who have the potential, I want to be that one taking that chance with them. Because imagine how many women who could be scientists and pilots and doctors and lawyers and artists and writers that have been left behind the way by virtue of the fact that they went through a period called puberty and their parents had to choose between their brother and them. So that's the other thing. The third thing was, there are some who make it through high school. But who's going to invest in them for university when they're not even sure that they'll find a job after university? I want to also take a chance with that group. So what we started was basically providing these educational support through financial means for these young people. Over time, we sat in 3 years and evaluated our work. We realized that paying school fees was not making the next generation leaders. We had to include a serious process of mentorship, providing leadership opportunity, internship, and all of the different things. So we've included that in our program with the group of students that we have in the program. But then we've also recognized that, like the Sustainable Development Goals, you cannot pay school fees and not worry about the poverty that the child lives in, and not worry about the state that they live in, that is the ethnic background they come from. Is it one that respects the rights of women, or one that is not even taking into consideration that a girl has a right? So all of the things, or some of the things that the SDGs talk about, we're recognizing that there's no way you can make the next generation leaders without thinking about the conditions surrounding these girls. It's not enough to just pay school fees. You need to think about their home environment. You need to think about their cultural reality, their religious reality. You just need to think about everything and kind of budget around these issues, because at some point, in order for them to fulfill the dream of being educated, you will have to help them navigate these challenges that they find themselves in. So that's where I find myself today.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did a large evaluation at one point of girls' education programs in for the Global Fund for Women, and I remember being just the complicated issue. You educate a girl and then you send her back into a community that thinks of girls and women in a certain way. You put so much pressure on this young person to create change when they're with, and basically like leave it on her shoulders.
Yeah.
and not touch the systems that she's a part of, or the belief systems, the world that her father runs. You know, it's how do you know, so girls' education is one piece that has to unlock a whole set of things that are transformative in the culture, in the community.
Yeah, I was just going to say something about the what I sense, what I'll just call the many faces of justice, if you will. So I listened to you and you speaking about how to taking care of these girls and helping them find a pathway to a life that can take care of them. And I you know, to lean into the cultural, religious realities and to introduce them to some kind of security. Over time, I've done many critiques of education, but I'm stumped when I listen to you talk about your experiences with these girls and how these activities that you do with them actually is some kind of redemption for them. And yet I also have to balance that with what I feel is my own present situated reality. So I have a daughter, she's 3 years old, and very soon I'll have another daughter, hopefully. It has to be 2 girls, no boys with me. But she hasn't gone to school yet, and she most likely wouldn't go to school. We're part of a movement called the Unschooling Movement, and we're dedicating our lives to, that's my husband, wife, and I. We're dedicating our lives to living with her, providing a learning context or learning environment with her, or understanding her deep needs that school environments may not be able to provide. But that's my own context, that's my own situatedness, if you will. I cannot speak for persons who are in other different conditions and they need the work that you're doing. So I just wanted to bring out what I sensed at some point as the many faces of justice, how justice isn't a singular thing that could be applied universally, and how we have to lean into the context, the specificities of each context. Just wanted to bring that up.
Were you waiting for a response, or you were just making a comment?
No, I was just, the spirit of the moment just called for a wonder at the kind of work you're doing. I probably would be doing the same thing that you're doing if I was in that context, and that's Ubuntu all over again. But where I find myself, having worked in the university, having seen what is done in the university, having seen what educational systems promise in terms of presenting a linearity and saying, if you go through this process, then you're likely to become this at the end of the day. That story itself is crumbling. And people are looking for other ways, educational alternatives, if you will. I don't know if there's time for that. Elizabeth and Thomas know about a friend of mine called Manish Jain. And he started a university up north in India, in northern India, called Swaraj University, where there's no degree, there's no certificate. Sorry, that's my daughter crying if you're hearing any noise in the background. He started a university where the rigid curriculum, it doesn't exist. There's no lecturer, there's no graduation. There's only a communal gathering around, the learning of a single person. And I just feel that most of schooling today isn't designed for people. It's designed for governments to perpetuate a kind of citizenry. So I just wanted to raise that up and see what it provokes or evokes in you? Maybe let's say that's a question now. What does that invite you to think about?
Well, you're entitled to your opinion, and one of the things that you raised that I appreciate is the whole idea of the context. And you're the person that really expressed that you have very limited understanding of your own reality as a Nigerian, given that you barely speak the pidgin. You hardly know a lot about everything. But I'll tell you that the reality of the Africa that I know is that failure to engage in those institutions that validate your intellectual ability means failure to engage in the world, failure to engage with them, So the educational institution represents a higher order of society, or a space that takes you in the making of them, takes you from that place to this place, that place of suffering and poverty and everything to it. That's how our African society have created, or made it to look like that you cannot be who you want to be if you haven't gone through the walls of some of these things. But beyond that, even in some of the northern contexts, that is the space that provides you a seat around the table. So, for example, when we did activism, I knew that our work was superb, that we had done a great thing by the grace of God, and that I could speak at any panel on the work that we did. But it was very important for me to go to get a graduate degree. I needed some paper to validate me. So yes, I had gotten so sick and tired of hearing people call me a grassroots activist, and not taking anything that I did intellectually seriously. So when people ask me, so why did you go to graduate school? I said, to validate the work that I did. I can't say it added much to my learnings. It created a space for me to see other people doing similar work that I'm doing. Because there were people from Israel, from Palestine, from other places, but from Somalia, and they remain their colleagues to me, but it was just the need to be validated that beyond just holding placards, I had that intellectual ability. So except where you are creating a word, and pardon me for saying for your daughter that doesn't include coming back to Africa, but you might want to rethink, that no schooling thing and give her or get her the credentials, because
I knew this would be a very strong point too. That's why I raised it up. But sister, isn't there a space?
I'm not criticizing you for it.
I know you're not. This is a dialogue.
Has not gotten to the place where even homeschooling is recognized as serious schooling. Because some of the spaces you go, you say, "Oh, my child is homeschooled." They look at you like, "Seriously? What are you talking about?" So, but for me, I still need to do that, especially for girls in Africa, if they must be taken seriously. So that time we have over 60 students or over 70 students that we educate in 7 countries around the world. And I'm proud of that, because we're creating opportunities that a lot of these girls may not have seen, and we're just unlocking that passion and intelligence that they have, and they are charting a course for themselves to take on the world the way they know how. So I think for me, that is most important. Elizabeth, if I take one more and then I'll sign off.
Okay, great. I guess there are 2 things that I'm torn between. One is are you teaching, working with girls to bring peace, to be peace peace activists in the work that you're doing?
Yeah,
How do you bring activism into the work that you're doing with the girls in school?
activism is my life. So when I talk about the evaluation of our program, after 3 years, we decided we didn't have names for our program. So for the scholarships, the programmatic name for it is Education for Peace and Development. And with the understanding that we're sending these girls to school to be peace activists and to be leaders that will consider development as a core for whatever agenda they set. How do we achieve this? By engaging in a process called transformational leadership. So every year we're endeavoring, this year was the first year, to take 20 girls through a whole process of 2 weeks of leadership training, and then an entire year of not just mentorship, but they design and develop their own community projects based on what they have seen and engage the community on that level. Then they have to find one social justice cause that is dear to them to work on. So even before then, the girls have always been involved with different things. When we had the Ebola crisis in Liberia, we made it mandatory that our students break up in groups, and we gave them money to go back into their communities to mobilize their peers to do awareness. During moments where we have spike in rape and sexual assault around, we ask them to go out there and start their own movement. So by themselves, I've seen young women, a few of them, who are really finding a voice, using their voice. I had a student who went to school one entire semester, and one of her core courses was offered in 4 days. And she came to tell us that this is not right. It should have been over a period of weeks. So once she started racing it, we joined her on her course. The school refunded us, and we made it mandatory for them to start that course all over during the summer. And the students who sat that course were not going to pay a thing. So we've had that. We've had students that we've encouraged, and they have used their voice to report sexual exploitation on campus and different things. So this is something that is ongoing. We may win some, we may lose some. The other key thing that we get them working on a yearly basis is sexual and reproductive health and rights, you know, because of the teen pregnancy crisis and all of the different things. So they also find, so for me, I don't see activism as a day job. I see it as my calling by God. And there's no way I can do it without it rubbing off on those who are around me. So my daughters are fierce feminists. My husband knows that there will be times that he have to put placards in his car, or it will have to be moments where he will have to bail me out if I ever get arrested. But he also knows that I have a voice, and I intend to keep using that for the greater good of humanity.
Great. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was about hearing God telling you to bring the women together, and just the deep trust and faith that was. Well,
I tell people that my faith is everything. My faith in God is everything. I lean on Him. I trust in Him. And I believe that at the end of the day, it's just by His grace that I'm able to do what I can do. And it is by His grace that I will continue to do what I do. I often do my work by finding time to quietly listen to what it is that He's telling me, you know, because activism, whether we like it or not, is a spiritual journey. And I'm not saying it's a Christian journey. I'm saying it is a spiritual journey. So if you are a Christian, it's a journey for you. If you are a Muslim, it's a journey for you. If you are a Buddhist or a Hindu, a Baha'i, whatever you find, faith tradition you come from, it is impossible to do this work without an understanding that there is a higher power that is greater than you, responsible for everything that we see happening in this world. It's very hard to do. And on that note, I say thank you, Elizabeth Bayo. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, sister.
Can we say goodbye to your niece?
Oh, Limo, I don't want to see your face. She come.
Do you speak a bit of Yoruba?
No,
No?
we don't.
No, okay.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
Mm.
Bye.